3 out of 10, 7 out of 10? When does it really matter? Well, I'm going to tell you on this video. Hi everyone, thanks for tuning in, and this is going to be a bit more of an impromptu style video in a sense. People comment on the ratings that I give games. Not always, and not necessarily in a negative light, sometimes in a good light, but people maybe take a little bit too much focus on what the number rating is. And certainly in reviews, I suggest that you look at more what the person is feeling. What are they telling you? How are they expressing it? That should tell you whether they love and hate a game. But of course, you can't have a review without one of those number ratings at the end. And I do get asked every now and again, what does it mean? What does it mean when I give something a 7 out of 10? How do I give this a 7 but give this an 8? What's the difference between a 7 and an 8 and a 9 and a 10? What's the seal of distinction versus the seal of endorsement? So I figured, why not just do a quick little video to essentially tell it how it is. So let's go to the bottom of the barrel and just quickly talk about my 3, 2 and 1. This is essentially a game I consider bad, and bear in mind all these ratings are subjective, not objective. You know, it's like I give a rating for a game at the end and I talk about whether I think it's good or bad, but that doesn't mean that because I think it's bad it will be rubbish for you. You might love it. That's why we like different games, we have different tastes. But 3, 2 and a 1 basically means I think the game is bad and I dislike it at ever increasing levels of utmost hatred. There's certainly some games which I detest a lot more than others. You may argue that they are well constructed games and fantastic, and if you do find these games amazing, then by all means play it. Don't let me put you off. I'm sure most of you don't. Most of you probably don't even care what I say about it, which is great. Well, you know, as long as you're watching the video, I guess. But all in all, these are just games that rub me the wrong way, and sometimes they'll just be like, oh, I'm not a big fan of it, I just think it's pretty bad, it's a bit slow, it's too long, it's too punishing, it's too boring, that kind of thing. But then when you get into the 2 and the 1, that's when you start getting to the point where my hatred for the game goes to high levels. You know, we're talking between the idea of if people are praising it online, I have to resist the urge to jump in and go, no, it's overrated, And then on the other extreme, you've got to the point where I would not lose sleep if I went around at Christmas and stole this game and burned it off people's shelves. You're sick! That is like utmost levels of I hate this game and I don't even want it to exist. But of course, it's all subjective. There are games that you probably hate that I love. I mean, I've had enough people give me garbage for me loving Sentinels and the Multiverse a lot. Fair enough. If it's a garbage game for you, that's fine. At least you've got games that you like and you love, and that's the main thing.
Kill him. Kill him now.
4 is a below average rating for me, and that's to kind of say that yes, I don't like the game, I don't think it's that good, there's too many things wrong with it versus what I do like about it, and there will be some positive points to mention on some of these, but this will be a game that I won't seek out at all, I won't want to play it again, but I don't necessarily hate it. I may think it's overrated, certainly if people go like, oh, this is a 10 out of 10 game for me, I'll think it's overrated, but I don't necessarily have a hatred towards it. And if somebody did make me play it, I'd be like, okay, you know, other people enjoy it and I'll still play it. Because the bottom line is that I can play a bad game, or a game I think is bad, with good company. That's fine, because at the end of the day, games are more about the people you play with than they are the game themselves. But I could not play a game that I think is bad or below average with people that are also bad or below average. You know, it's like you kind of need at least a decent gaming group anyway. But these games, I'm like, not seeking them out, not really caring, they're just there, really.
Well, that was pointless.
5 is what I consider average. It's a half decent game, it's okay, but again, I won't necessarily seek it out, but I don't necessarily think the game is bad either. It's usually got like a mix of pluses and negatives, where it could even be extremes, where I absolutely love this stuff, but then I completely hate this stuff. It could literally be those two extremes that all come together and meet in the middle nice and say, that's a 5 out of 10 for me. But other times it could just be a game where I think, yeah, it's fine, there's this bit that's kind of cool, this is alright, these aren't that great, I wish the aesthetics were a little bit better, but it's like average. This is kind of like the meh rating, the meh. And to be honest, I don't want to think about that on most games, but then when you get thousands of them released a year, you are going to get games that you literally just look at and go, yeah, it's alright, but nothing special. It functions, it does what it needs to do, it's a chuckle, but that's kind of it. Meh. And those games are fine, I'm happy to play them, but I, again, won't seek them out, I'm not going to buy them, I'm not going to recommend them to other people, and when you've got this many games, you can't afford to be just meh.
5 is right out.
My number 6 is above average, and this is before you get to the seals that I have when I rate games. 6 is a decent rating overall. People might think, oh, you only gave it a 6 out of 10, that means you hate this game and it must be burned and like you're a heathen amongst humanity. It's like, no.
We have found the witch, may we burn her?
6 is still good. It's just not good enough to give it that awesome like recommendation. There'll be a case that I'll go, I like it, it's fine, it's got overall more positives than negatives, but not by a long shot. But then it may also be a case that it's getting closer to that meh rating where it's like, it's fine, I'll play it, but I probably won't want this to be the first one I play on a night. So I'm happy to play it if someone suggests it, but I'm not going to bring it in my game bag. I'm not going to say, oh, has anybody got a copy of this game? You know, I wouldn't mind playing that again. No, this is more a case of if somebody wants to play it and that's the general vote, I'll play it. And I won't have a bad time with it. I'm just not going to be like remembering it much afterwards. And if I've played it that one time, I'm kind of done. Like I don't need to play any more on top of that. These just miss out on the seal of endorsement slightly, but these are not bad. They're not even, you know, particularly ones that I wouldn't necessarily recommend to people. I might actually recommend 6 out of 10s to people if I feel that for someone else it would easily just crutch up those couple of marks to an 8 or a 9 for them. But yeah, they just miss out a little bit on that little seal marking and can sometimes be the disappointing games as well, where I'm expecting the game to be a 9 out of 10, or 10 out of 10 even, but they kind of like, oh, it wasn't as good as I thought it was going to be and it drops back down to a 6. 7 out of 10 is what I call a good game. This is when you start getting the seal of endorsement. This is kind of like the silver medal, shall we say, of the 2 seals that I have. Not to say that it's like bad to get a seal of endorsement for me. It's great to get a seal of endorsement. I'm saying that your game is good. It's just not great. It's not one that's going to be one that I'm going to shout from the rooftops and say this is one of the best games ever. It's certainly not going to be one that I'm going to, you know, necessarily want to play over and over again, but I will like to play it at times. I will probably have 7s on my game shelf. You know, some of them do exist on my shelves, but I must admit I am wittering away the 7s and more trying to keep 8s, 9s and 10s in my collection. But for the ones I have, I'll probably slip 1 or 2 in my game bag, bring them along, and if people want to play them, great. I'll have a good time because they're good games and I can say that this is a solid game that people should check out. Sometimes with a 7 it's more a case that there's a few negatives that kind of like, I wish it was just shy of being great. If it could have just sorted out these few problems, it would have been absolutely great. But then it could also be that the competition is a little bit strict for it and it doesn't have anything unique to stand out on its own. I have to consider games on a grand scale, like all the games that exist. Yes, I do look at a game kind of in isolation, but you can't really. You can't, for example, let's, I'm not going to say ratings for these, but let's take a look at perhaps New York Zoo. New York Zoo, a new game that came out. For me, I'd probably give that a 7. I haven't yet decided. I'm still doing plays of that. But the problem is that that game is a polyomino style animal-based game. Okay, with a farming mechanic, well, say farming, an animal breeding mechanic that we've seen in every single like farming game that's come to date. And we've got a huge like stack of polyomino games as it is. So not only does it have to be decent in its own right, but it's kind of got to be one that I say, oh, this is better than these other great games in this genre. If it can't quite match them, then it can't really beat a 7 out of 10 because I will first want to recommend these ones over these ones. But like I say, that's not to say that 7 is bad. I still think 7 is good, and if you do get a 7 and earn my seal of endorsement, you've done well. 8 out of 10 is what I call great games. Just shy of the seal of distinction level. Not quite good enough to reach the levels where I'm like, oh, I'm going to shout this from the rooftops and say this is like one of the best games ever. But it's still like a lot better than the 7 that I have, and it's usually the minimum rating that you need to be, with some exceptions here or there, to get into my collection, and that's the main thing. I do have some 7s in my collection, but when I've been culling games lately, the 7s are the first ones to go. Unless, and I did mention exceptions, where they tend to be gateway games that are very good for teaching people. Because I've got games like No Thanks and Love Letter. They're not exactly the most brilliant games out there, but they're brilliant to teach to new players, including my family, so I have them in my collection even though they are 7s for me. But 8s are like, yes, this is a game that I want to play fairly often. Not stupidly often. I might play it once and then be good for a little while, but then I'll want to bring it out again. They will usually end up in my bag, and I will generally go, if people are interested, you know, I've got a cool game here that we could play. It's good fun, you know, you might like it. But if there's other games that I prefer, then certainly I'm going to be like, ooh, okay, fair enough, we'll play you another time. But I'll still be like, you know, it'll be cool to get this game played because it is good fun. But as I say, the collection's only so big, and so the 7s are kind of whittling themselves out, and occasionally the occasional 8 has to whittle out as well. But if you do meet an 8 out of 10 for me, you're a great game and you could be a keeper.
Oh, let's keep them.
Say what?
And now for 9s, yes, now we're into the Seal of Distinction. This is a gold seal that I award to the games where I'm like, these are some of the best in their genre or category, or they're just fantastic games in their own right. This is the point where I start singing their praises from the mountaintops, essentially. I will want to play these games often, 9 out of 10 specifically. You know, I want to put them in my bag, I want to bring them to the club night, and I'll be keen to get them played. I mean, like, we could really play this one. It is really good, you know, and hopefully get some people to play it. But, you know, these are games where I'm just like, everything kind of works. It will have, you know, a decent theme. It will have, you know, or decent mechanics to go with it, because it could be either or. But it will have the right length, a decent ease of play, or good variety of paths to victory, good amount of content in the box. It will have a lot of the boxes ticked. Not necessarily all of them though. If it's going to be a 9 instead of a 10, it's probably got 1 or 2 aspects that I think could make some improvements, but they would be small nitpicks, or they wouldn't be particularly big flaws. Yes, they'd be a flaw, like for example, I might get an excellent mechanical game, but the components could be a bit better, they're a little basic. That could be enough to drop it to a 9 out of 10, but if the rest of the game is really that enjoyable, I might be able to overlook the aesthetics to a point, unless they're absolute complete garbage. But you know, 9 out of 10 is just a great fun game. If I get to play 9s for the rest of my life, I'd be a happy man. But of course, there's one rating better.
Oh, what a day! What a lovely day!
And that is the legendary 10 out of 10 rating. Also a seal of distinction. There's no extra seal for between a 9 out of 10. If you get a 9 or a 10 from me, you've done fantastically. You have made a game that I want to, you know, talk about a lot. And with a 10 out of 10 game, I want to sing it loud from every mountaintop and recommend it to as many people as I can. That's not to say that I will say this 10 out of 10 game is the grail of games and everybody must play it, otherwise you're not a gamer. No, no, no. A 10 out of 10 game for me, like for example, Sentinels in the Multiverse, people already know this, you know, is going to be a 1 out of 10 for certain other people. I know players who are interested in trying this out, and it's like, great, I reckon you'll enjoy it. You like superheroes, you like card games, this will be great. But then there are others who I know that's like, oh, I'm not the biggest fan of co-ops, and I don't want to have too much to think about on my turn. I just want something nice and light, and I'll be like, yeah, maybe this isn't kind of the game for you. So it's not like 10 out of 10s must be played by everybody. But these are legendary status games. These are the ones which are like the pinnacle of their genre or mechanic. So if it's a worker placement game and I give it a 10 out of 10, if somebody asks me, what are the, like, some worker placement games you would recommend, I will instantly give the 10s first. Like, this will be the one that's kind of like the benchmark for games in its genre. I will say that it's like somebody gives me a new worker placement game and I'll be like, okay, this is pretty cool. Let's see what it's like in comparison to some of these 10s that I've got. Does it meet those kind of likes? No? Okay, well, what's it do differently? What's it not doing as well, etc. But, you know, having benchmarks for these categories helps, because we've got so many games released each year, and I'm not in this whole cult of the new type club where only the new games should get any praise. No, I've got games on my shelves that are good decades old, and they're still great. They could still be 10 out of 10s for me despite being that old, because I'm like, well, someone came along and did it near perfect. And I will stress that 10 out of 10 does not mean a perfect game. It means a legendary game. It means one that people will talk about for years to come. It means one that I'm going to talk about for years to come. But it doesn't mean that there are no flaws at all. You can still have flaws. There is no such thing as a perfect game. Anybody who believes that something can be perfect is in themselves imperfect. Is that how it goes? I don't know. Maybe I'm getting confused with my sayings here. But like I say, I can still have flaws with a game. Let's go back to the Sentinels example. You know, I love it. It's a 10 out of 10 game for me. It does have a fair amount of bookkeeping. And the artwork is fine for me, but it could have been better. These are small nitpicky flaws for me though. And that's the thing. The flaws have to be so minor or so unintrusive that it doesn't spoil the overall great enjoyment for the game I have. I cannot think of a single game in my collection that I would consider a 10 out of 10 in perfect rating. Like absolutely perfect, no flaws whatsoever. There's always going to be a problem, but like I say, those problems will be pretty small, but I'll of course mention them in all my reviews. So thanks for watching this video, and thank you to my loyal Patreons who without their help this channel would not be able to exist and fund everything that has gone into the channel to date. If you like what you see and have earned your subscription, then please click the avatar to subscribe and hit the bell for future notifications, and don't forget to check out my code in the description of this video where you can use the code at zatu.co.uk and get 5% discount off all the board games in your basket. Until next time, you can check out the most recent upload on the channel or a video specifically suggested by me. Until next time, remember, no matter what I rate a game or how you rate a game, it's still at the end of the day, only a game. Take care, stay safe, and I'll see you soon.